Did you know Amazon provides ways of working that fits your lifestyle? They know you value your time outside of work, juggling family, school, friends, or other activities. That's why they offer a variety of shifts that work for you. There are full-time, part-time, and even temporary opportunities that can work with your schedule. With great starting pay and sign-on bonuses. If you want a career that fits and adapts to your lifestyle, head to amazon.com/apply. Amazon is a proud equal opportunity employer.
This week at Macy's, get 20 to 50% off great Valentine's Day gifts, like dazzling designs from our fine jewelry collections, now 35 to 70% off. Find incredible sapphire, ruby, aquamarine, and amethyst jewelry specials from Effie, 65% off. And get a $29.99 diamond pendant bonus buy with any $25 purchase while supplies last. Plus, Macy's Star Rewards members earn on every purchase except gift cards, services, and fees. Savings off sale and clearance prices, exclusions apply.
Hello, thank you for tuning in to another episode of NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. I'm your host, Bethany Moore. I'm the Deputy Director of Communications with the National Cannabis Industry Association. Today, I'm happy to introduce my guest, Dominick Monaco, PharmD. He's Director of Laboratory Operations at CLS Holdings, Inc., City Trees. He manages City Trees production and distribution activities in Nevada. Dr. Monaco oversaw formulating and manufacturing Louisiana's first ever medical marijuana tinctures in tandem with Louisiana State University's Ag Center. Dr. Monaco graduated from the University of Arizona College of Pharmacy in 2010 and has been involved in the legal cannabis industry since 2012. Welcome to the show today, Dr. Monaco.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure. So let's start by getting to know you a little bit better, and let's talk about more about your experience at university and maybe some other experiences you had before getting involved in our very exciting cannabis industry.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to do so. Well, I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is actually where I currently am launching our new tincture SKU, believe it or not. But I grew up mostly in Arizona. I had a knack for science and math and went to high school in a little town called Sholo. It's in northern Arizona. I graduated there with a GPA of 4.4 and had my choice of full rides to any in-state college. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nice work.
Saved me some money for sure. And decided that the University of Arizona in Tucson was going to be my option because it had a top ranking pharmacy program. So I already had an idea prior to going into college that that's what I wanted to, entertain at least and see if it was for me. So after 2 years of undergrad, I had completed all of the Doctor of Pharmacy entry prerequisites and passed the PCAT and was awarded entrance in 2006. Subsequently graduated in 2010 at the age of 24. I spent most of my career focusing on inpatient and outpatient hospital pharmacy, retail pharmacy, and compounding pharmacy as well.
Wow, killing it. Love it. Yeah, congratulations. It sounds like it was very rigorous. Sounds like you had your head down for several years getting through that college experience as well.
Oh yeah, nice a lot of summer school involved too.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Got to get it in.
So I wonder, with all that background, you had your choice of, medical careers. How did you end up getting involved in cannabis at that stage?
Sure. So back in 2012, when Arizona promulgated their regulations for their medical cannabis program, I immediately began applying my expertise and knowledge to help these patients of Arizona have access to clean and consistent cannabis as medicine. However, this wasn't actually the first time I'd been introduced to cannabis as medicine. I was working at a compounding pharmacy during my 4th year of rotations. At this particular compounding pharmacy had the state contract to supply all of Southern Arizona Medicaid HIV and AIDS patients with their medications. Most were mailed out. However, we did have a few patients physically show up in to pick up the prescriptions. So during these interactions, I noticed that I was dispensing Marinol, which is an FDA-approved synthetic THC molecule, and it's used for AIDS waste and cachexia, and also just kind of lipodystrophy, kind of where fat cells kind of move around and they kind of grow in areas that don't normally grow.
Weird.
Very weird, and it's a side effect of a lot of AIDS medications. So obviously they're prescribing something to to alleviate something another medication was working for. So so I asked these patients how the medication worked for them, and about 80% of the time these patients would reply, yeah, it's okay, but it doesn't hold a candlestick to the real thing. And that's when I began researching cannabis in my 4th year of pharmacy school, the endocannabinoid system, and really decided to dedicate my career to helping these patients get access to the real thing. Personally, little did I know that these interactions would help me later in my own life when it came to my own chronic pain and how to treat it. So I was actually diagnosed with kyphosis at the age of 17. So scoliosis is curvature of the spine left to right. Kyphosis is curvature of the spine front to back. And so at the age of 17, I was immediately put on hydrocodone and ibuprofen. Needless to say, by the time I got out of high school, I was taking 30 pills a month. And by the time I graduated pharmacy school, I was taking 540 pills a month.
Seems like way too many, definitely.
Seems like way too many, and I haven't taken one in 8 years, and it's strictly due to cannabis. I use pretty much strictly live resin concentrates to alleviate my pain. It does take a lot, but it's a lot better on myself and my liver in the long run. So I wanted, just to be an arbiter of people having access, and that you do have other options.
Yeah, great work. And I'll mention that NCIA published a white paper report several years ago about cannabis being a solution for the opioid crisis. Many
Absolutely.
of these painkillers are just being thrown around, and even if you only need them for a couple days for like a dental surgery or something, they can be pretty rough. And sometimes people do get addicted unnecessarily. So yeah, great. Thanks for sharing that background. And Marinol's interesting. I thought of a joke while you were talking about that. It's like cannabis is, like the real fruit juice, like a good beverage, and Marinol's like a LaCroix, like it kind of has a hint of strawberry flavor, but not really.
Correct. Yep. Exactly. That's exactly a good anecdote there.
Thanks. So fast forward to today. You are working with City Trees. You're doing some lab operations there as well. Tell me more about that. What's that like?
Sure. So we have a 25,000 square foot warehouse in it that encompasses our production, cultivation, and distribution licenses. All 3 of those licenses are inside that 25,000 square foot warehouse. Within that sector, most of my day-to-day and efforts are spent on qualifying our input material that goes into all of our City Trees products. I take sincere pride in doing so, and in making sure that our organization has access to the highest quality input material on the market is really paramount for me. It allows us to differentiate our products. It allows us to make different products and really just stand out amongst the competition. That being said, I oversee our business development sector, vendor relationships, SKU development, and QA/QC inside all of those departments. So I'm really kind of the glue that sticks everything together inside that building, and I'm happy to do so. Amongst other things, I do go out to other states for our corporate company CLS to do vendor qualification on large scale purchases, as well as other licenses, whether it be cultivation, manufacturing, or distribution.
And very true to the cannabis industry, the nature of the cannabis industry. You're wearing 6 different hats in your role.
Sure. Yeah.
Cannabis is a bit still in that startup kind of situation, even though we're sophisticated to the point of having multi-state operators and extremely large companies, mergers and acquisitions, and the whole 9 yards. But there's still a lot going on. So
Absolutely. And I'm happy to be a part of being fiscally responsible for our shareholders and the higher ups that, pay my bills. So,
Yeah. S-
so I'm happy to have the six hats on. Don't worry.
Sure. So in Nevada, what's the market looking like there? How are you feeling about the current laws?
Uh, Current laws are good. They're very stringent, but I think they're stringent for a reason. Obviously, they don't want the Fed coming down and saying, "Hey, this is exasperous as far as what you're doing, and your oversight of it." So I think we're doing good. I think there could be things on the testing side that really need some tweaks. There's other states that test for a lot more terpenes and flavonoids than we do here in the state of Nevada. And I'd really like to, for my own edification, as a PharmD and as a scientist, I'd really like to know what's really in the weed or extracts that we're using and putting into our products. So we're only getting a very small snapshot of that with the regulated amount of types of terpenes that they test for here. So I'd like to see, some push towards that. I'd like to see some changes on testing lot sizes. In the state of Nevada, we have 5-pound lot sizes for finished flower, 15 pounds for trim, 5 pounds for small buds, and 125 pounds for fresh frozen. So it really puts a financial burden on the cultivator to divvy up every 5 pounds that's supposed to represent a lot when we have other states in this great nation of ours, all the way from 50 to 80 pounds per batch, and anywhere between $300 and $1,000 per test, depending on where you are and what they're testing for. That really adds up. Really hits it really hits the books, really hits the margin at the end of the day. And I think we could be proponents for that.
That is a really interesting nuance about state laws there. Thanks for sharing that. All right, on that note, let's take our first commercial break, and then we'll come back and chat more with Dr. Monaco from City Trees. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice will return once we give a voice to our sponsors.
This week at Macy's, get 20 to 50% off great Valentine's Day gifts, like dazzling designs from our fine jewelry collections, now 35 to 70% off. Find incredible sapphire, ruby, aquamarine, and amethyst jewelry specials from Effie, 65% off. And get a $29.99 diamond pendant bonus buy with any $25 purchase while supplies last. Plus, Macy's Star Rewards members earn on every purchase except gift cards, services, and fees. Savings off sale and clearance prices. Exclusions apply.
All right, we're back on NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio, and I'm chatting with Dr. Monaco from City Trees in Nevada. So let's take a deep dive into extraction technology and the extraction market, and what to do if you're entering into the cannabis extraction side of our industry. Sounds like you're probably going to need a couple things right off the bat. One, the cannabis, the cultivator. Two, probably some equipment to do that extraction, right?
Absolutely. Hit the nail on the head there. And so with there's a lot of things within those two categories that you need to look for. And so that's what I'd like to outline here today. Absolutely. So going into it, talking about biomass. So you're going to want to you're getting into the market. Where is your biomass coming from? Do you have your own cultivation license? Great. What are the metrics on that license? Do you have integrated pest management in place to kind of as an insurance plan, right, for those plants? How many plants per light are you putting into your facility? What are the type of lighting are you using? Are you using LED? Are you using high intensity diodes, HID? What are the pounds per light, or grams per watt, or grams per square foot? However your cultivator gives it to you. What is that metric, right? Because you knowing that metric is going to allow you to calculate how much biomass that they are able to produce out of their facility, and then you get a certain fraction of that, right? So it'll give you a good basis of where to start out. What's the distribution of flower to popcorn to trim during this harvest? And this is a very intrinsic question that people don't understand of why I ask it. I ask it because if you have a higher propensity from flower to popcorn to trim, so say you're 50% flour, 25% popcorn, and 25% trim on a distribution of your harvest. That's the typical what I would like to see. Any deviation from that, you're going to see if you get more flour and less trim, that means that trim is going to be less tight, right? And that bud might look a little bit more larfy. So you want to inspect that final product a little bit more, right? In addition to, you're going to ask the grow times, typical 9-week harvest, but some people, to get an extra harvest in every year, are going to do 8 weeks. That can lead to higher CBG content as opposed to THC content. What's the dry time? What's the cure time? What's that water infrastructure that do they have? Do they hand water, or do they have a drip system in place? What are the environmental controls that they have? How many harvests per year do they get, and the number of pounds per harvest? Those are the kind of things that you're going to want to ask in your cultivator. So now you've got your biomass locked down.
That was quite a check. Yeah, I would need to write that down. That's quite a checklist. Yeah, go on.
But so now you've got the biomass locked down. Now you're going to be looking at extraction equipment, and I'll go into a little bit about methodology here in a little bit. But as far as extraction equipment is concerned, you're going to be looking for NRTL or ETL listings. These are third parties that qualify equipment based on electrical conductivity and the safety of them. You're going to look for a third party peer review. You're going to look for the power requirements, the labor requirements, the throughput of those machines, the efficiency of those machines. What's the maintenance schedule look like? What's the cost of replacement parts? Is there a cleaning process available for that machinery? That way you don't have to take the whole thing down, right, and then clean it and then pull it all the way back together. Those are the kind of things you're going to be looking at, in addition to obviously the capital. How much is it going to cost you?
That is a really good start, and that's just getting started, setting up your facility and getting all your ducks in a row as well. Wow. Yeah. So I remember at all of our trade shows, especially our most recent one in San Francisco, I walk around the expo floor and I see a lot of machines and a lot of technology to conduct the extraction. Of course, I'm not a technical or machine engineering type of person. So maybe you could walk me through a little bit what I was seeing, and maybe break down what some of these different methods of extracting the good stuff from the plant are like.
Sure. So there's really going to be, typically on the market, there's going to be 4 types of extraction available. There's going to be CO2, there's going to be ethanol, there's going to be hydrocarbons, which is butane and propane and the other isomers, and water. 2 of those are actually considered solventless, which is CO2 and water. CO2 is a gas, but in CO2 systems, they go to subcritical and supercritical temperatures and pressures. And when that happens, it actually liquefies the CO2. It becomes a liquid and it runs over the biomass, solvates the cannabinoids, and then comes out the other end. So there's caveats to each extraction method, so that all of that machinery, again, is going to be broken down into CO2, ethanol, hydrocarbon, and water, right? And so going through the efficiencies, CO2 is going to have a 90 to 95% efficiency, up to 25% total cannabinoids. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if you're running biomass that is over 25% total cannabinoids, you'd be best to run it twice, because it's not going to capture all of the cannabinoids that are in that biomass. For ethanol, you're looking at an 85 to 95% efficiency, up to 25% total cannabinoids as well. Hydrocarbon, same thing, but up to 30% total cannabinoids. So it's it can capture a little bit more, right? And then water is really highly dependent on biomass, but typically you're going to get 75 to 85% efficiency, up to 30% total cannabinoids, and then 50 to 75% on hash products. So after you've got your hash and you press it and try to make it or manipulate it into another product, you're going to get a 50 to 75% yield on that. So those are kind of the efficiency things to worry about versus CO2, ethanol, hydrocarbon, and water. They all have their different rates and throughputs. CO2 and water are going to be on the low end, water being on the lowest, CO2 right next up to that, hydrocarbon a step up, and then ethanol is the fastest system you can get, 320 to 500 pounds in an 8-hour shift. as far as ethanol is concerned.
Okay.
There's also caveats on infrastructure. CO2, there's no significant control area that you have to have. There's no maximum allowable quantity of CO2 that you can store on site. As opposed to ethanol, that you have to have a class 1 division 2 control area to actually extract in. There is a maximum allowable quantity in place, so there's only a certain amount of alcohol you can have inside your building based on your fire riser room and your sprinklers. So those are kind of the caveats, right? Hydrocarbons is the same thing. You're going to have a class 1 division 1 room in place, which means that it's explosion proof and has a way of ventilating everything out. And then we have water is the very easiest way, and obviously the least expensive and safest way. You're not working in with any high temperatures, high pressures, or any solvents at that matter.
Huh. Okay, so when I was listening to you go through the various types of caveats, when we were talking about how many cannabinoids and terpenes you can extract, I was like, oh, okay, so it kind of sounds like water is the best way to extract. And then you begin talking about efficiency and how much and how fast you can extract, and
Correct.
it's a little bit of a different picture. So it sounds like there's really no one best way to do things. It's just about which one you want to try, I guess.
Right. And it's gonna come down to your market, whatever market you're entering, and that leads into our next question. And it's gonna come down to what SKUs inside the market, right, are easiest to produce, are selling the most, right, and things that you can sell at a decent margin, that you can pay your bills and pay your employees, and have some profit and continue to invest in the business, right? And that's all going to depend on pretty much again, it's going to depend on everything we just talked about, plus teeing it and tipping and offering on the icing cake here, with the market analysis, right? Because you've got all this information, but which one do you go with, right? Do you go with both? Do you go with all, do you go with 1, 2, 3, 4? Do you get all of it, right? Which is obviously huge capital expenditure, but it depends on how big you are, how big is the market that you're servicing, and again, what SKUs are there and what SKUs do you aren't there and that do you want to produce.
Interesting. Yeah. Let's take our last commercial break, and then let's talk about the markets where all this is concerned when we get back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back to continue our chat with Dr. Monaco of City Trees. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice will return once we give a voice to our sponsors.
All right, we're back on NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio, chatting with Dr. Dominick Monaco from City Trees, based in Nevada. So we were kind of going through some of the basics to think about when you're selecting your extraction equipment. And one huge factor is the market. And, every year that goes by, more and more states are legalizing cannabis, either for medical or adult use sales. So lots of new markets always lining up for cannabis companies to consider. So how does that play into extraction and the production side of the cannabis industry, where markets concerned, like Northern California's needs and wants of cannabis consumers? I think it looks a little different than maybe Boston, Massachusetts, for example, just because of culture. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you chose those two particular locations. When you say those two locations, two things that come to mind immediately are access to biomass. Northern California, who has been the progenitor of a lot of the cannabis that has been distributed both legally and illegally throughout the state or throughout the United States, has been doing it for a very, very, very long time. Boston, because they had a medical market in '95, I believe they approved
Yes.
in California. So Boston is just getting on the train. And so that means that they don't have the access, they don't have the number of cultivators, they don't have the number of experienced cultivators, and things like that. So it's a very striking comparison And when you do that, and kind of dive down into, who are the big cannabis producers in the market, and what, if any, is their availability for third-party sales? And when I mean third-party sales is, what do they have extra that they can sell to you, right? Because that immediately, when I hear those two places, it comes down to, okay, I'm going into this market. Here are the reasons I'm going into this market. This is how big the market is going to be. Here's what is projected. Here's what it is now, right? I need to find a consistent supply of biomass if I have any chance, and I mean any chance, of starting a brand and starting a business and continuing that business for any foreseeable future.
We all need consistent access to biomass. I mean, yes.
So on top of that, going into a market and analyze it, who are the big extraction producers in the market, and what do they produce? Like, what are the SKUs they produce? How many do they produce, and how many do they sell, right? There's a difference between how much is in their inventory versus how much do they sold that month, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do these producers get their biomass, right? Are they vertically integrated? Do they have, co-branded relationships or partnerships? Is that something that you can do with the other cultivators inside that market or territory, and really try to leverage what you can leverage at any given time, right? On top of that, you're going to really look at who are the big distributors and dispensaries in the market, right? Obviously, who am I going to be selling to, and who's going to take the product from A to B. Additionally, you need to think about the supply chain in and of itself. So like in California, the distributors take a big cut of that sale, and they have a big influence on what goes to what place, i.e. dispensary, right? And ultimately what the consumer sees, right? That's not the case here in Nevada. A distribution license simply takes product from A to B, and they get a simple fee for it. They don't house it there. They don't say, this is what you're going to take, this, that, or the other. So you really need to get a feel for how does distribution work in that market, right? When it comes also to dispensaries, what products would they like to see that their own, production, if they have one, doesn't have the capacity or know how to make, right? Because that's something that you can automatically get on the shelves, right? And something that they're going to say, okay, and you could say, hey, I'm going to co-brand it with you. You could even put your dispensary logo on it, say manufactured by or powered by City Trees, and go from there, right? So it's a lot of things that you can do in any given market.
Yeah. Got it.
Once we got all that figured out, we're going to go into average price per category, pricing fluctuations and trends, both wholesale and retail, number of active licenses, production, distribution, cultivation, dispensary, and their percent of total and physical distribution within the territory, jurisdiction, or state. Have there been new licenses awarded, and or are there licenses available? And is there a timeline to be operational, i.e. is there a state mandated timeline after they award that license that you have to be operational? In the state of Nevada, it's 12 months.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, we're running out of time here, but that is an exhaustive list of factors to take into consideration, and each and every one is very important as well. So I'm looking forward to taking a closer look at these extraction machines next time we have our trade show in San Francisco. We'll be back at the Moscone Center July 20th, 21st, and 22nd, 2022. That's a lot of twos. And it's our 8th annual Cannabis Business Summit and Expo. We're so excited to return, to get back to the business of in-person events very safely, very carefully, but nevertheless, the cannabis industry gathers once again. So you can head to cannabisbusinesssummit.com to learn more about that show as we make our way through the first half of this year. And I hope to see you in San Francisco at that event, and hopefully many of our listeners as well. So thanks for joining me today, Dr. Monaco from City Trees. Really appreciate having you on the show today and breaking things down for us.
Thank you, Bethany. I appreciate it.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to yet another episode of NCIA's Cannabis Industry Voice on Cannabis Radio. Until next time.
The opinions expressed on this CannabisRadio.com program are those of the guests and hosts and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CannabisRadio.com. Any rebroadcast, republication, or retransmission of this program without proper consent is prohibited.
This week at Macy's, get 20 to 50% off great Valentine's Day gifts, like dazzling designs from our fine jewelry collections, now 35 to 70% off. Find incredible sapphire, ruby, aquamarine, and amethyst jewelry specials from Effie, 65% off. And get a $29.99 diamond pendant bonus buy with any $25 purchase while supplies last. Plus, Macy's Star Rewards members earn on every purchase except gift cards, services, and fees. Savings off sale and clearance prices, exclusions apply.